This is Bam Electric Ghost, and we're live on the air with Genevieve Skory. And we're going to talk today about your ability to help entrepreneurs, not quit and not give up. And so we're gonna get into that as your story. And before we get into the depth of your story, we always ask any guests on the show a couple questions. What motivates you, and why do you do what you do?
That is so good. I know I was prepared for that question. I think it's a great question. I think, especially right now, I think it is the best time ever for people to consider having their own business. And for me, business is figuring out a way to monetize a passion that you currently have. So a business could be being a recording artist, a business could be being a dentist, a business could be running your own business, being a coach. The thing that drives me and the reason I do what I do is because I remember the time where we were sitting in our basement and thinking, what else can we do? We don't feel like corporate is for us. We have different passions. We have different things we want to do. And we set out on our own. We learned the hard way. And learning the hard way is definitely not the best way. You get a lot of great learning the hard way for sure. But talk about feeling like quitting. And I just feel like there are so many people that have amazing stories, amazing passions, have a lot of gifts to add. And when it comes to actually breaking through the mental barriers, everybody needs like that dream advocate, that person that's going to stand there and hold your dream up and go, this is what we're going for. Remember? Because the brain does not really easily give in to new things. So my passion is helping people at a time that they really need the most help. And I believe the world really needs more good businesses, more people pursuing their passions, more happier people out in the world.
That's why I like to do this podcast, because I like to give people a chance. I like creative people, and creative people aren't just musicians or filmmakers or painters. Creative people are entrepreneurs.
Yes.
People are people who have a small business. People have that are life coaches or
Yes.
mentors. Anything you do, I think all human beings are creative, and sometimes people
100.
put this like they think you got to be Shakespeare, you got to be Miles Davis, you got to be Prince, you got to be something, somebody like that, Bob Dylan. It's like no, it's like everybody every day you use your creative capabilities of your brain and your soul and your everything that you are. And that's what I
Yes.
tried to thread the needle with the show. I mean, when I first started doing it, people say, "Well, why would I be interviewed like a CEO by a musician?" And I proceeded to point out, through the interview, that there was some synergy between like what he does and what I do. And if we've been able to thread that needle and get this out there in the world so that people understand, like your secret sauce is you.
Yes.
And when
Yes.
people start to realize, they give themselves permission structure to be like self-actualize,
Mm-hmm.
and everybody wants to be in a box. Now everybody wants to do 9 to 5. I think the pandemic kind of gave people kind of a kick in the butt to like, oh, I don't have to do that commute. Maybe I never really liked that commute. Maybe I don't like sitting in that cubicle. Maybe I could do something that I dreamed about. And
Yeah.
I proceeded to
Yeah.
interview like over 1,000 people on this
Yeah.
show that were in that mind frame.
Well, and a lot of people, so to me, creativity is creating something from nothing, creating something from nothing. And that spans so many different genres, right? So musicians create something from nothing. Entrepreneurs create something from nothing. Even athletes create something from nothing. They got to dig deep. They got to find something else in them. They create success. They create momentum. They create that play. So I completely agree. It's not just the entertainment or artists. Actually, let me dial that back. I think we're actually all artists. I really do. I just think we perform in different ways, and we're just not used to using that term in business. But we're all artists. We feel very passionately about something. We want to bring something into an existence. We want to create an impact and an effect in someone else's life. So to me, I think you're spot on. We are indeed all artists.
Yeah, because one of the things is like, people who are creative sometimes don't fit in a box. And you get a lot of businesses. I mean, I've worked for Fortune 500 companies. I work now with like small businesses. In my day job, I'm a software developer slash business.
No, you are not.
Yes, I am. I've been doing it for 25 years. Right. So I used to,
Incredible.
I traveled. I lived in Japan. I was a road warrior. But the thing is, I found is like I was trying to fit within this corporate bureaucracy, and I end up hitting a wall. Being an African American, I kind of hit the glass ceiling, and I said, you know what? I don't want to play that game anymore. So I became more independent, and then I finally found like a startup that was aligned to what I want to do, and it allows me to work remotely. And my wife has
Mhm.
cancer. My daughter has a disability. So
Mm.
I need some flexibility. I can't be the road warrior. I can't be jetting around anymore. And so you have to find things that actually fit instead of you trying to fit into a cog in the machine.
Yes, exactly. And there's endless possibilities and there's endless opportunities for people. And I think that that was the one thing you mentioned, COVID. And I think that was the one thing that stirred an awakening in people. Like we never imagined a workforce that would be predominantly from work from home, but yet we did it. And I think that it opened people's minds and ideas to new possibilities. And I think once you get a little taste of that, there's no going back because you don't have constraints. You're your own limitation
Yeah.
when you are in charge of your own thing. So there's pros and cons, right? So when you work for corporate, there's steady income, right? There's a steady check at the end of every pay period. When you have your own business, you have to create that.
Yeah.
You have to provide enough value every day for someone to go, here's some money for the help and the services that you provide. But when you surround yourself with the right people, and when we talk about why, like I think when we talk about entrepreneurship or we talk about anything, my brother is an ultra marathon runner. He runs 100-mile races. He has to enter this zone where it's like, this is what I'm doing.
Mm-hmm.
I'm taking this one step at a time. I can't think about mile 100. I've got to think about the mile right in front of me.
Yeah.
The same is true.
Yeah, in the moment. Yeah,
Just
it's a big thing. Yeah, that is a big thing with musicians, right? Like I like to play jazz. I like to play experimental music, and a lot about experimental music compared to a classical musician is like we might have a set piece, but we're willing to deviate that piece, right? We're willing to, in the moment, change it, like jazz fusion, like Herbie Hancock and Miles Davis. Somebody changes a note, the other guy changes the note to go with it. It wasn't in the original composition, but you roll with the changes. You don't think you got to start back from take 5, start again. You don't. You can flow with it.
Yes. In comedy, right? In improv, that's the rule of yes and, right? I see what you did. I'm gonna acknowledge it, and I'm going to add on to it. But that takes a little bit of practice and trust that what you didn't expect to happen has happened, and we can go with it, right? We can add onto it. We can create something new and better. I recently was introduced to the philosophy. It's not new to anybody out there, probably. It's new to me. That this notion that life doesn't happen to you, life happens for you. And so if you look at everything in the moment, the cues you're getting, the paths, the different choices you're getting, the openings of doors and windows that are being opened for you, the opportunities really are endless. But I think the things people struggle with is like you butt up against, like I love entertainers from the standpoint of they just are bred differently. Like for a very at a very young age, you learn what you just said. You learn to improvise. You learn that at a very, very young age, which is a gift. Business people, we're not so good with that, right?
No, because everybody's got to have the plans. Like I work with people and we're always running scrum sessions. We're running like action meetings and and we're trying to run to according to the plan. We got our business case, we got our use case, we got the project plan, got the SOW, got the charter, got all these things. And then life happens and thing doesn't go the way it was supposed to, right? And then you're not on the plan. Where you take
Yeah.
away from QA, you take away from this, take away from that. You have to kind of be like that fusion jazz musician, and that's why I've always been able to kind of left brain, right brain. Uh, like, how can I be in IT and be a piano player or be a musician? Like, because I see it as the same thing. Right? Math, yeah, music is math. Music
Yeah.
is frequencies and timing, right? And so in computers, it's all frequency and code and timing and basically flows, like workflows.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
like your music is a workflow. You get
Yep.
multiple parts, like at different timings, things are supposed to happen. And so if you think about that and you start to see the relativity between things, then it's not, you don't have to stay in the lane. You can take things from one lane and apply it to another. That's where you get the Da Vinci.
Yes.
You get the people the Renaissance mindset.
Yep.
That you can have art, science, spirituality all mixed into it, and you come up with that era where people were art, science, spirituality. It's all mixed together, right? It's
It
like, why
is.
not?
Yeah. Yeah. And there is some truth to the fact that business is actually a spiritual venture. It's a spiritual journey, it's a spiritual venture. You're finding things out about yourself that you didn't expect. You're learning to trust in things that you didn't know you needed to be trusting in, and you need to dig deep and find out that you're far more capable than you actually ever really thought you were. I mean, I know you experienced that as a software developer. I know, because when you look at, because I like back in the day when we used to meet with our software developers, I loved meeting with them because something really cool always came out of the conversation. But they created a space for each other for if then, what if we did that? What if we
Case this,
added
case
that?
that. Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Well, that's where we live today. I lived in a waterfall world where we had to have everything identified. I was a child of the 70s, mainframes like COBOL. I know that stuff. But now we're living in, the age of blockchain and, AI.
Yeah.
And it's still got some of the basic logical constructs of, still computers. It's just yes and no, really
Uh-huh.
on and off. Is this more sophisticated now in terms
Yeah.
of how many case statements we can handle? Eh, so it seems like it's thinking, but
Yeah.
maybe it's not. But the idea is, we have to always learn and we have to
Yes.
look at options. And so, like a lot of times, as a technologist, I'm not rooted to any one type of code. I look
Right.
at the business problem, right? It's like there are many ways to solve this problem. Some things will cost more than other things. Some things will come in faster than other things. Some is a short-term solution. There's a long-term solution. We give the options as an analyst. I give the C-suite people the options. Then I talk to the programmers and I can understand what the programmers want and I can understand what the business people want. I'm kind of like the bridge
Mm-hmm.
between
Mm-hmm.
both
Mm.
worlds as the business
Mm-hmm.
system analyst. And
Okay.
I know a little bit about the code.
Okay.
I
Okay.
can actually do it,
I
but
know you. I know
I
you. There was one of you at our job. 100%. Right.
but I think it's like an art. It's an art and a science
Yes.
because like we have to design the front ends, the UIs, the experience that the customer reps are going to have, that the C-suite guys are going to get on their dashboards, and we have to be able to present it in a way that they can actually use it.
Right.
That it makes sense, because we can get real technical and we can use to design things that nobody really could understand. And we force people to do it because they say, well, that's the way it is. And now we design
Uh-huh.
things the way people actually work, the way people
Yes.
actually use things. And so it's a different world where we did used to dictate how the user should do it. Now the user tells us how they want it. And so it's a
Yeah.
different world. And it's interesting how you have to sell because we have to sell. Like the
A
idea of
hundred.
selling is everywhere. Like a musician, I have to sell my song. As
Yep.
an analyst, I have to sell my opinion as a consultant
Yep.
of what you should do. And you've got to learn how to, like, the idea like bad selling syndrome. Like, how do you get out of that?
Yes.
Maybe you
You
can talk
know,
about that.
yeah. So, you're so spot on, because a couple of things. One thing I do want to touch on before we talk about bad selling syndrome, because I could spend a week talking about that, is this notion that you learn, and I think musicians learn this very quickly. I think software engineers learn this quickly. Failure is feedback. That's literally all it is. We assign all this crazy meaning to failure when failure is literally just feedback. So if you're trying to get from point A to point B, and you're finding out really shortly that this didn't work, but you really want to get here, well, it's a blessing to fail and learn that you were headed in the wrong direction. You got to go this way instead. And I think that's where the selling comes in. I think you're absolutely correct. Everybody's selling all day, every day. Where it feels like bad selling is when the person doing the selling doesn't authentically really care and empathize with the person they're talking to. So if you really you're pushing your own agenda, either this is easier, this is what my ego wants, this is what I think is best. Even if you're right that it is the best way, the person on the other end doesn't really care. The person on the other care only knows what they know and only feels what they feel. And until you can acknowledge, we tell people all the time, your job as a salesperson is to get into the head and heart of your customer with the conversations they're already having. So don't try to get them to have a different conversation. You can't do that until you understand the conversations they're having currently. Get in there with them, feel it, understand it, acknowledge it. Then you can steer the conversation. But otherwise, it's just bad selling. It's just ego. It's just, I feel like you forced me into something, whether it's a song, whether it's a methodology, whether it's an outcome. Nobody wants to feel like they didn't have a say in where we were going, how we were going to get there.
I think it's all about listening, because, sometimes people have a top-down approach to, like, and if you have a more collaborative approach,
Yes.
then if you have real listening skills, so the listening skill is not just what the words coming out of somebody's mouth are, but the words, the meaning behind the words, the nonverbal communication that's happening, like, the situational awareness of where you are, the culture you're in. So there's a lot of other factors, and it's like when I lived in Japan, there was a whole thing. I lived there for 2 years, and there's different mindsets. Like, there's a zero defect mindset. And we had American management that said, like a level 5 defect is not as bad as a level 1. But in Japan, like level 1 through 10, they looked at it all as level 1.
Okay.
And so there was like a zero defect mindset. And if you made a mistake with your policyholders, right, in your insurance company, you set up a convention hall and you invited your customers and you went and apologized and bowed to them. American companies don't do that. Japanese companies do. When the American division tried to enforce like an American mindset in a Japanese workplace and market, it didn't work, because like the Japanese understood their market. They understood where they were. The Americans didn't have presence of mind to have the situational awareness to know where they were. They were trying to force their mindset on other people.
Yep. Didn't understand the customer, didn't understand the conversations they were having, didn't understand their needs and wants, just assumed. So you're right. It is listening with the intent to understand, because some people listen for a break. It's like, I'm just going to listen until you stop talking, and then I will continue to force my agenda. It's kind of like,
your agenda. My agenda is to have you accept a product that has defects, and you don't want to accept that, right, at the level of defects I'm willing to put out there. And you think it's
Exactly.
like, I'm not going to notice. It's like, well, I actually do notice.
Yeah. Not only do they notice, but it's like a top priority, clearly. It's like on the scale of 1 to 10 in terms of how important is that, it's high for them. And we're saying it's not a big deal. And it's kind of like, well, you don't get to
Yes.
decide that. The
Yeah, there's
customer
like
decides that.
disconnecting, and it's really that's a bad selling example. It's like you're trying to force an American marketplace concept into a
Yes.
Japanese marketplace. It's like, okay, well, that's a good example. Like if you're a musician, right, and you're in a band and you're kind of top down in it, right? Like you're the primary writer and you write, there's a bass player, there's a drummer, there's a keyboard player, and you try to tell the drummer exactly every note for note what to do, and you
Uh-huh.
don't trust him. Like he's got 10,000 hours of being a drummer or more, but you want him to do exactly what you did, and you're not even a drummer.
Yeah.
I'm like, so that when that becomes painful, people don't want to be in that session because it's like, okay, none of my ideas are being accepted. I'm being told to just be a just be a yes man, just do exactly what you say. It's like, well, what's the life in that? What's the fun in that? Where's the energy in that? You start to feel like it doesn't come out that great. It comes out
Yeah.
it doesn't have the spark as if everybody was like on fire and connected and it felt like they're all given to it. Then you feel like, in the workplace, like if you have somebody on the floor, you got the engineer from Carnegie Mellon, he won't take any criticism from the floor. The people putting the thing together say, well, this doesn't work right. Engineer says, no, it's like I got a PhD. Okay. Still doesn't work.
I am here to tell you it does not work. Yes, 100%. And it is interesting because I don't think there's anything more beautiful than seeing what a bunch of people can create together. So when the collective minds come together, when you accept this sense that everybody has this innate ability to create and design and to make great things together, you always come out at the end, you're like, that's not what I would have done, but man,
Yeah.
was that brilliant. That was a brilliant experience. That was a great meeting. This was a great product. It was a great presentation. It was a great song. It was a great outcome. I think a lot of what people struggle with, and because I was thinking as you were talking, I'm like, why do we struggle with that so much? And I think one of the reasons we struggle with it is we don't like the journey to get there. So
It's
one
different.
person wants it this way, another person wants this way. I'm kind of inclined to go, let's hash it out. Like
Yeah.
creative tension is required. It's not anger, it's not frustration, it's not even bad, it's creative tension. And if you allow the process to continue, what ends up coming out the other end is usually top notch. Super,
Yeah,
super top.
it's that kind of session. If you think about it, there were like all this documentation, but then there's a whole like lore about McCartney and Lennon having like these like arguments about Beatles songs and like the direction because they were both kind of co-equal creators and they would have
Mhm.
these directional arguments if you get into the history of music history. And I was really fascinated about the directional arguments they had like with how should this go, right? And when you dove into it, like they had to get through that fight. They actually had wasn't a fight, but it was a conversation. Sometimes there was an argument, sometimes they got a little heated,
Yes.
and it was because of the passion that you had the Beatles. But the problem with it was that they got to a certain point where they just got tired of each other because like they could only deal with that for a certain length of time. They could not stay in it because it's like I have a totally different direction, and they couldn't agree, so they went off
Right.
on their own. And so there's sometimes things will come together, work, and people should be in that room. And then sometimes you find out like I don't need to be in this room anymore. I need to go in a different way.
Yes. And I think the difference is philosophy, right? So if we all agree philosophically on a baseline of we share core beliefs, then we have a core set of emotions that are we all experience the same thing. But then what happens is the actions that get dictated by that tend to be different. So If our beliefs are different, well, then we're going to have a different set of actions. So we have to align on what are the beliefs. And I do believe in that case, they just got to a point where like, we just fundamentally
Don't
believe
lie.
different things.
Yeah.
We
Yeah,
believe
alignment.
different things.
Yeah,
Gotta go.
directional, like the way you want to go. Like somebody wants to go and do like art rock.
Yes.
Somebody wants to do pop songs. Somebody wants to do experimental music that's never going to hit the top 10. And somebody
Mm-hmm.
wants to do something that wants to be in the top. So it's a philosophical argument. It's like if somebody wants to build very specific devices, somebody always wants to make a device that everybody wants, that everybody's going to go get it, right? And somebody said, "Oh, I want a very specialized thing that only certain people are going to get." That can become a totally philosophical argument about like, is
Right.
this for everything? Is this a everything? Is this a very specific thing? And you can get, I've been in a room with engineers. It's like, no, it's like this should be this way, and they stick to their guns, and then they go off and they make their own company. They go off and do their own thing because it's like, you know what? Because you're not they it wasn't working there, and they didn't
That's
want
right.
to just be part of it. They had a passion, they had an idea, they want to see it all the way through. So when you have a vision, but if you're more willing to like, okay, I'll adjust my vision to fit, and at certain points in your life, you might be in that place where you
Yeah.
might be just learning, or you're willing to supplant like your full vision. But at some point, like when you want to be successful on your own, you say, you know what, I got a lot of unique visions and they don't always get enabled here. So I got to go off and do it myself.
100%. Because if you don't feel fulfilled, like everybody has a certain set of human needs. And one of those needs is contribution. And if I'm in a room where philosophically I want to contribute in a different way, then it behooves me to go and find a different room, a different table, a different conversation, a different thing, because I can't get my needs met there
Mhm.
anymore. So that is that's one of the reasons that a lot of times people diverge, and and I
Right.
think it's interesting. I think it's okay. So the topic was, successful people do feel like quitting, right? Everybody feels like quitting. Successful people don't quit. I think in some cases, successful people do know not necessarily when to quit in general or in a final way, but they do know when to pivot. So they
Pivot.
may
Yeah.
stop doing something to
Yeah.
start doing something else, but and that's okay. It is okay to say, well, this doesn't serve me anymore, so I'm going to go do something else instead. The kind of quitting that I try to help people avoid is the I'm just frustrated. And so
Yeah.
I'm
There's kind of
quitting because I
passion
just
argument. Like you get into a heated argument with a boss and you're like, well, this is a, and what I found sometimes it's like, you have to be kind of looking glass self, look at yourself, right? At some point in my career, I was doing all these different types of businesses within insurance, and I needed to learn another area, right? I needed to go from like health to property casualty or reinsurance. Now, I didn't have really any experience. Like everybody wants 5 years. Nobody wants to hire you unless you have 5 years of this, 5 years of that. But I found a company that was willing to have me come in and learn, which is rare.
Mhm.
'Cause a lot of people, they actually saw what I've been doing, and then they saw that this guy wants to go and grow in a different way. He's gone to Japan, he's done this, he's done that, so he probably can do it. So they gave me a shot without having all the 5 years, and so
That's
I felt like
awesome.
this is a way to go in, and now I want to stay in here. And I've had people come to me and want me to go back to where I was, where I had 20 years. It's like, well, why would I do that when I'm on this path? And I know I gotta learn. I don't have the 5 years. I've got to build up 5 years. So I'm not gonna go back just because somebody gives me 30% more. That's a short term. I could
That's
get
fair.
30% more. But if I stay long term, I could make 50, 75, 100% more. So it's like, so you have to
Yep.
kind of, sometimes you have to short term sacrifice
Yes.
for the long term gain.
Yes. You do, and you were very clear about where you wanted to go. So a lot of times people often feel like quitting because they haven't really thought through, where do I really want to go and why? Why do I want to get there? Because you and I both know it doesn't happen overnight. So that 5 years that they gave you, what a blessing that they were willing to take you under their belt and help you learn for 5 years. A lot of people never get that opportunity to make a shift like that. And they go down the wrong path for a very, very long time for money or for something that's going to happen in the future. And because it takes so long to be a super success, what I call a super success, meaning you have what you want when you want it. It isn't always about the money. It's about that emotional thing that you wake up excited to do and experience every single day. You were really clear about that. So when something else came along, even though it was more short-term money, you were able to say, that doesn't make sense because where I want to go is here. And I know why. A lot of successful people are very clear about exactly what they want, which means that they're able to say no to the things. Mm-hmm.
So the noise comes in and they don't get distracted off their path. Because I think
that's it always comes in.
Yeah, there's always comes in. It's always people trying to the industry is they like to pull people, and this keeps on shifting roles in the same pot. Yeah, to make this guy jump from this company to that company. They're not actually training anybody. And I just love the idea that I was going to get trained, which is super rare because people just want to have you where you are, with your skill set, not willing to actually put the time in to actually train you. And today in the world is like, there's all this new tech, there's blockchain, there's AI, there's all these new opportunities. And it being in software, you got to learn anyway. I think in life, you really have to learn. It's like you have to be willing to be a little uncomfortable, right? To be successful. Like Bowie, I just mentioned, David Bowie said that he didn't feel successful as an artist unless he was treading water a little bit artistically. And I thought, as an artist, I was like, wow, that's really cool. He doesn't want to just phone it in. He would go into things that he wasn't the best. He actually was singing with Luther Vandross on the Young Americans. He knew Luther could sing better than he could. He wasn't intimidated by that. He wanted to learn from it.
Yeah.
That's cool. Like when you're willing to put yourself in places where you're not the best so you can learn. Right?
Yes. Because successful people value growth. That's another need that people have. And we find that successful people value that growth opportunity, which means being uncomfortable. It means being really bad at something for a while. Like most people, they just want like that immediate success. It's like, well, I signed up and I thought it was going to be fun, or I signed up for this, or I started doing this and I thought it was going to be fun. And the one example I always use when I train or speak is, how how many of you are moms or dads? How many of you have ever signed up in elementary school for that instrument class, right? That your kid comes home and says, I want to play the violin. And you're like, yeah, you've got these great images of this child and they come back and they're practicing and it's horrible. Like your ears are bleeding, you're like, oh my gosh, but they gotta be really bad in order to get good.
Yeah.
And you gotta create
hours. Whether or not you actually stick with it, that's the thing. Because
right.
it is like you don't sound good. And like any athlete knows, like you're trying to make that 3-point shot. How many hours are you there where you don't hit it? Right. Like it's like the noise that you hear from somebody trying to play the violin. Like most of the time, you're not going to hit it until you get the muscle memory and the coordination. It's the same thing on the instrument. You have to get the muscle memory. Once you got the 10,000 hours down, you put it in, then it's there. It's just getting to the 10,000 hours. Not everybody can get to the 10,000 hours. They'll drop it.
Yeah. And I think that's why people need coaches. I also think that's why people need an understanding of the learning process, and they need an understanding of this is all normal. We have all done this. Like every one of us will say, oh yeah, I remember when I was really bad at that too. Right. Every one of us has those cringy stories where you're like, yeah, I was the bad seller, or I was the bad organizer, or I was a bad leader. And you learn from those things if you value the growth part of it. But we don't talk about that enough. We don't talk about like, you're going to start this off. You're super excited. And then you're going to hit the pit of deception,
You
which is a cliff, by the way. It's a cliff.
That slam.
You're going to, and then right at that time that you're going to say, I cannot do this, you actually need an advocate. And as parents, we were there for our kids, right? We were like, no, you just keep, like, I will keep driving you to soccer practice, even though you were really bad at soccer, right? I will keep paying for those lessons, even though I'm not. And then one day you're like, wow, I feel like that was 3 blind mice. Was that 3 blind mice? I think that was 3 blind mice. And then the next year, it's like something better. And then before you know it, you're in these concerts where you're like, that's my kid, cheer one, you know? And everybody needs that, but not everybody has that. We need to normalize learning. We need to normalize failing as feedback. We need to normalize that it's part of the process. And by the way, just when you get good at something, like David Bowie, there's always another place. If you really are among the super successful, there's always another level of success.
Yeah, you keep on pushing into areas where you might not be the best. You jump into acting. If you're a musician, you try film directing, you try different jobs. You keep on pushing out of your comfort zone. And you know, a lot of times what I see with people is like they want things to be perfect. We're kind of in the age of perfection.
Yep.
And in the music industry, like I deal with all the young kids, they're like in these digital audio workstations, these tools like automations and computers. And you don't even have to, you can be a producer and not be a musician and write a song. And you could never even know how to play the guitar. You might not know how to play it, but you could actually write a song. It could be a big hit because a different skill set. It's like music theory and you learn how to put things together. But it's a different mindset between being a musician, though. Like if you want to be that musician that plays that bass or the trumpet, it takes time to do it. If you want to be the producer, that's a different thing. Some people try to say they're the same thing, and that's where they, there's a problem where people kind of misalign things and they don't fully understand. They think you can 0 to 100, and it's like different aspects of things, and it's hard to explain to people because they always just think you see on the net. It's like, oh, you can be a millionaire in like 10 steps. Like, really?
100%. Every time I keep saying 100%, but like that's so true. Like, and even as I'm out, and it is, everything happens so quickly now. AI isn't helping with that, right? Everything happens so quickly. People expect instantaneous success, and things are going to change as quickly as they are coming out now. So we're at a place where technology is just changing at such an incremental growth curve that like things aren't even going to look the same a year from now as they do today.
Totally, like it's the age of the horse and buggy switching to the gasoline, and that was like a big shock to everybody who was putting the horseshoes on the horses and making the car. Suddenly they had to go and learn how to deal with engines, and maybe they couldn't, and so they weren't able to get on that. Other people got on it, but we're in this kind of shift where even in my industry, programmers can be replaced by certain levels of AI. But the human factor is still a big thing because
so big.
No matter what tech can do, what the machine can do, it's the human perspective that why somebody pays for a consultant. Because it's your opinion and your kind of advisory point of view. And I think that it's that human kind of secret sauce of every individual's and all their human experiences is not what the computer has, because it doesn't have the map of your brain, everything that ever happened. It has information, but doesn't have those experiences that happen to you.
Yes.
That's our edge. Like the experiences have not been digitized yet.
The connection, the experiences, the empathy, the history, we are a plethora of emotions and experiences and abilities to connect, and that's never going to be replaced if we're wise. if we're wise, we need to be a little wise about it, but if we're wise. But I think it's also an amazing opportunity for people. I really do believe now is the time for people to have their own thing. I think the playing field, because of technology, is very even. People can catch up in no time at all.
Yeah.
But we have to be willing to be bad in order to get good.
Yeah, well, you just gotta, if I go back, I mean, this is like episode 1,235. I went back to my first episode and compared to what I do now, it's like terrible. And the thing is with podcasters, there's really interesting information. Like most podcasters stop after the episode 6 or they don't even get to episode 10 because they have certain expectations. They think they can go 0 to 100 and then they don't hit it and then they give up. I had this mindset, it's like I like doing it, like I like playing my guitar, like I like playing my keyboard. I'm gonna do it because I love it. So if I
Yes,
love to do something, I won't stop it until I
that's
decide I don't
correct.
love it anymore. And like you have to understand, why are you doing what you do? Like
That's correct.
if you don't have passion for something, then it's probably not going to be the best thing that you could be in. Like the thing that you're the most passionate about, if you can align that and find a way to market that,
That's
then
correct.
that's how you can be successful. I think that's the story. Is like not trying to be the Joneses because they are already the Jones. They're already the Joneses. You got to be you.
Yes. And you tapped into it 100%. It makes you happy. The process makes you happy. The connecting makes you happy. You're not doing it for some grand prize that happens in the future. You have mastered the art of enjoying the work in the moment. And as long as you continue to enjoy the work in the moment, yes, that's what gets you to episode 1000. Did you say 350? What are we?
235.
Holy cow, right? So that's what gets you to episode 1235 when most people don't make it to 10.
Yeah, it's like that's why I tell people like you got to put the work in. And if you're in the cutting room floor of any artist, like you go to their loft, there's all these paintings, none of them are in the gallery. You go to a writer, there's all these manuscripts that never went anywhere. Painting. Every artist has that story of the level of work they put into their craft, and not everything is out there in the world for everybody to see it, but everybody sees these like 0 to 100 stories, and it's not the truth. The truth
That's
is
correct.
the level of work people have to put in.
That is correct. It was 10,000 hours of overnight success, right?
Yeah.
You just didn't see the 10,000 hours of learning and failing and rejection and self doubt. You didn't see all that. And it looked like an overnight success, but it really wasn't.
But it's interesting because like reading in your information, like you're your mother of a successful like YouTuber, and
Yes.
YouTube is all about like people having like their secret sauce turned into like their personality, their how people see them, right? Through the what and it's their unique vision, and you really can't clone that. It is every YouTuber is their own kind of brand, right?
Yep. Yep. And it was really interesting. There's four of them. And I've always told them, like, you guys are like the case study of what it takes to actually be a successful entrepreneur. Because I remember back in the day where we celebrated 100 subscribers, where we celebrated 1,000 subscribers, when we celebrated 10,000, 100,000, a million, 2 million. It was kind of like when you're in that one stage, the idea of getting to the next one isn't even a thought. You're just so happy that you're there. But there were so many conversations that they were brought different deals and different opportunities. And like, it's just not who we are. So they were very, very clear. This
Oh,
is
to
what we
want it.
want to do. This is who we serve. This is on brand. This is not. And that's the same for anybody. Even like every day, like we talked about noise, you and I a minute ago. And it's like, our noise really are those brand deals that come up that you got to say no to
Yeah,
because
it was totally
not
like
on point.
it's not with your line to your brand. Like if when you see people, they it's the kind of common terms like sell out. Like if they say somebody who goes in lines with something that like the fans like that doesn't seem like what I was into, and then you're like, then people start doubting the authenticity of what you were doing because then suddenly it's like you're not like it's like this idea of like a punk aesthetic in music. Like if you're a punk and you go sell out to some soda company But that's not your fans aren't really into that because they're like
Right.
we're kind of against the system, and now you side with the system. It's like, what are you doing?
Exactly. Exactly. Got to stay on brand in your own head in order to
Yeah,
be successful.
unless you want to move out of that and say, well, I'm not there anymore.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
you have to kind of law
Agree.
of attractions, like where are you? Because sometimes like if you're the 17-year-old musician might have been in this place, the 25-year-old, 35-year-old musician's in a different place. If he wants to still have the fans he had when he was 17, fine. When you're 35, is that maybe you don't. Maybe you move to someplace else. You know, what I mean, you kind of have to know where you are.
Yeah. Yep. Know where you are, know where you want to go, why you want to get there.
But in terms of like work-life balance and feeling like whether you should stick with something or just find a way to work it in. Is that like a pressure? Because some people might feel like, well, maybe I have to leave this to have the balance, or could I
Hmm.
negotiate to get the balance?
Yeah. I find that once you get really clear on why you are doing what you are doing, that the answers lie there. So if it's some superficial goal, and sometimes people do start things for superficial reasons, it's like, well, I just want to make a lot of money, or it looked easy, you know. Well, in that case, I don't know. You're going to give up pretty quickly, and it's not worth not having the work-life balance for it. If you're doing it because it's fundamentally going to change your life experience or the life experience of the people you love, then you negotiate it. You figure a way to negotiate it so that and part of that negotiation, I believe, is getting better at the 20% of the work that produces the 80% of the result. Most
Yeah,
people never have those conversations, which
yeah,
ends up consuming so much time.
yeah. A lot of times, if you're actually like truthful about how much effort it actually takes to get to the end product or the end service. And sometimes, like some people work in such a way, like they don't need the 9 to 5 hour structure to actually give you what you want. They could do it in 3 hours or 4 hours, right? And so that means they could have a work life balance where they, other time I'm doing something else, like a podcasting or music production or something else. So if you found a way, like you have a lot of hats and you actually be truthful with the people you're working with, I can actually get this done, and you
That's
can see
correct.
I can do it, and you prove you can do it, then you don't need me to be there on call because you want me just sitting there,
That's
right?
correct.
I gave you what you wanted. Do I need to be there now? I need to do something else.
Right. Can I create outcomes or am I punching a clock? That's fundamentally different. And
Yeah,
if you
that's
can
true.
find something where you're in charge of creating outcomes, I can't think of a reasonable boss or a reasonable company that wouldn't say we actually would rather pay you for outcomes than to sit in a chair. But it's
Yeah,
out there.
yeah, that's what you got to find. But like as I said, I do have another show coming up, but
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
I did want to end with we do have your Instagram,
Yes. Look
Genevieve
me up on
underscore story. Like we have it scrolling below.
Instagram. Yes, Instagram or Facebook. Look me up. I'm happy to connect with people. If you need an advocate, if you just want to talk success, it's a hobby. I like it. I also work, but like that is a hobby.
Yeah, well, it's cool. I've
It's
enjoyed
enjoyable.
talking to you today. I think it's a
Same.
great where you are in terms of like giving people a different perspective on like how to like reframe, where they are in their job. Like so, like you can kind of like, do you just hate it or do you have to decide there are things you need to change or adjust or have conversations,
Yeah.
right? So that you can really have a litmus test of like, okay, I'm actually going to test like where I am and make some decisions and not just stay in something.
Yes.
Because
Have the conversations you're not willing to have with yourself, with your spouse, with your boss, and you'll be fine.
well, thank you again for being on the show. This will
Thanks
be
for having me.
available. Well, it was on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube in real time.
Great.
It's out there.
Great.
After we're off there, we can be there. But by tomorrow, we're going to publish on multiple platforms like Spotify and Apple. We'll give you a landing page for your audience to check out.
Thank you.
And
I
I
would love
appreciate
to.
you being on the show.
It was my pleasure. Thank you for a great conversation. Take care.